this presentation. Hopefully it won't pick up any of you guys anyway. As I said, my name's Ruth Jelly. I completed a Master of Communication in Book Publishing through RMIT last year. And I've also just recently given a presentation to the Independent Publishers Conference about the modern state of publishing. What I wanted to talk to you today is the academic and educational publishing industry, which is where I have more specific experience, albeit from a few years ago. So in the abstract for today's session, I described academia and academic publishing as being parts of an ecosystem. But in fact, they are more like a part of a set of complex social structures where different actors have different roles to play. I like the ecosystem analogy because it generates an idea of life cycles and organisms feeding off each other. But I also like the implication of coexistence. However, this coexistence is no longer harmonious. There is significant climate change going on, and the environment is no longer conducive for all to exist in. The advent of digital publishing has turned up the heat for publishers and shifted the power structures in favour of egalitarian academics. In 1989, Carolyn Martin stated that new media disrupt old social structures, such as old ways of determining trust and reliability. And when I refer to new media, I also incorporate under this banner new communication technologies such as digital publishing. What publishers now face is a crisis of trust. Many academics no longer trust them because they are sceptical of publishers' business models and their propensity for double dipping, getting academics to sign over the copyright for the works that they publish, and then getting the institutions that they work for to pay to access the publications that they have already paid the academic to write. So academics have come to realise that they're being exploited by publishers. I'm going to be a bit controversial here and say that without publishers, academics would not have this rich system of publication to tap into for their benefit. That is, to publish to get ahead in academia. Publishers are a product of the academic system itself. Academia needed publishers when it had no way of doing the drudge work that's involved, well, at least not to do so efficiently. The peer review process, the editing, the production, the distribution. There's a reason why this work was outsourced to publishers. It's because they're good at it. And once upon a time, we trusted them with it. Back to Carolyn Martin again, and her claim that new media disrupt old ways of determining trust and reliability. The trust between academics and publishers is now broken. And this has sort of come about with a combination of factors that's led to this current state of distrust and scepticism. Publishers have become commercial, profit-making entities. Many of the major publishers, particularly the major academic and educational publishers, are owned by very large media organisations, and very few media organisations, I might add. Digital publishing technology has been developed in recent years, and this is something that academics have worked out how to use to their advantage. No surprises there, we're generally a pretty smart bunch. And also the introduction of permissive copyright systems such as Creative Commons. All of these factors combined have kind of delivered us into a new environment that publishers are struggling to deal with, and that the academics and academia generally is trying to agitate to get their own benefit from. Compounding this drive for profit within publishing houses and the publishing sector is that publishers need to reduce costs along the way. For the big publishers, this is done by outsourcing editorial and production work to counteract the loss of control over quality that happens with not just the outsourcing but offshoring this outsourced work. Publishers now put the onus of quality and integrity of the content back onto their authors. It is rare that any academic publication is allocated a subject area specialist editor or anybody who actually has any qualifications, skills or experience in the academic area in which they are publishing, maybe with the exception of the commissioning publishers. But further along the line, editors, proofreaders, production people, typesetters do not have skills or qualifications in any particular academic area. So for those of you who might be writing under contract for a publisher at the moment, I suggest that you check your contract details very closely and make sure that you know who is actually responsible for ensuring the quality of that publication. And consider the implications of assuming that somebody else is checking the quality of your work. Academics distrust publishers. Publishers are getting desperate as well in this environment. Their aim is to own and control as much content as possible. They each want to be the one that an institution turns to source all the content that they need for teaching and research. They want the libraries to go to one publisher to source all of the content that they need to access in their library. They want all the faculties in their institution also to come to one publisher to source all of the content that they need for all of their textbooks and all of their learning materials. Academics have kind of been backed into a corner by the publish or perish conundrum. Of course, we all want to get ahead in our academic careers. And often to do so, we have to hand over our copyright in order for the exchange to be published. Of course, there are open access journals available, but they are yet to develop the prestige that high-ranking journals have spent many years developing, and which publishers who control the rights to those journals will fiercely defend. If we want to break this stranglehold that publishing in high-ranked journals has over academia, we need to consider changing the system itself. Or we need to accept that we've done a deal with the devil. In fact, we had a strong hand in creating that devil in the first place. It seems that we're finding with the open access journal movement that it still costs. All the things that publishers do well, that takes time and effort, and at the end of the day, that costs money. What publishers do now is that they present solutions to academics. They provide solutions to our teaching needs. They also provide solutions to our research needs by way of providing an avenue for us to publish the research that we produce in order to get ahead in our careers, as I've said before. They appeal to our weaker sides. They appeal to our desire to do the right thing and publish openly. They've found a way to get around doing that as well. They appeal to our desire to access good content and tools for teaching at little or no cost to the faculty. But there is always a cost when dealing with the devil. Just ask the famous blues musician, Robert Johnson. There are traps with open access publishing as well that land us back in the same quagmire that paying to access content should be available for free, because somebody's already been paid to do the research and write it up. So it's just a cycle that keeps going around. And in fact, Simon Huggard, who I'm hoping will turn up a little bit later today from the digital infrastructure team in the library, gave an excellent presentation about green and gold open access as part of Open Access Week in the library in late October. And I encourage you all to find and watch that seminar if you haven't already watched that presentation. Hopefully maybe we can put something up on the SoLT website, a link to that somehow. Because I'm not going to encroach on Simon's area of expertise in this platform today. So the trap in accepting publishers' solutions for teaching delivery and providing teaching resources is that it's our students that have to pay. And also by extension, it's the university that pays out of the library budget. And let's not kid ourselves, the library is under just as much financial strain as the rest of the university in this current environment. The university is legally obliged to provide access to SECT texts through the library. So anybody who is setting a commercial textbook for their students is setting a cost for the library as well. And we need to make sure that we are making that connection. What is happening increasingly now is that publishers are making arrangements directly with academics and faculties that are questionable in terms of equality of access for all of our students. Often what is happening is that publishers are providing print copies and setting up a system so that print textbooks are available freely and easily through the library by entering agreements with faculties, publishers and the bookshop, whereby the bookshop just sells a print copy or several print copies to the library. But often what happens with that is that there will be an electronic text version that is produced or planned to be produced as well, but the library is excluded from having access to that. They're not provided any sort of subscription rates and they're not provided any avenue to negotiate a fee for access. Hopefully this is changing. In fact, I know that there's a committee working on this at the moment. So what I want to ask, is it fair that an electronic version of a textbook is made available, but the publisher excludes a library from accessing the electronic version, even for a fee? Is it fair that for students who choose not to purchase textbooks for whatever reason, usually it's financial reasons, is it fair that they only have access to the print copy, that they have to come all the way onto campus and access the reserve copy when students who might have more financial funding available to them buy the textbook, have access to the electronic copy and can access that wherever and whenever they like. I think this calls into question some of the morals and values within the university system, and I think it's also going to put us in danger of breaching some of our ethical requirements as educational providers. And I wouldn't be surprised if perhaps legislation eventually comes up to a point where it catches up with the technology and states that both print and electronic versions of set materials do need to be provided for students to freely access through the library. Surely we should be aiming to make educational resources available to students in the most convenient format possible for them to suit their study needs and to make sure that it fulfills their study requirements. It's not about us, it's actually about them. Especially in the age of Future Ready, where the university is aiming for a significant proportion of subjects and study to be conducted online, we need to make sure that if we are using electronic materials, that access is provided equitably to all of our students. Of most concern is the possibility that some educational tools that are used in assignments and assessment are only accessible through electronic publisher systems or websites, which the library does not have access to. Sometimes even the faculty has access to it. This may actually put us in breach of our legal obligation to provide free access to all learning materials for students. So what we need to do as academics is ensure that we fully understand our obligations under the, I think it's the Educational Services Support Act, for providing access to educational resources for our students. We need to consider the ethics of our dealings with commercial entities. And most importantly, we need to ensure that we have the students' needs at the heart of what we do. And we need to change the system so that we can dedicate more academic effort to providing equitably accessible materials for our students. Open educational resources, which is an area I've done quite a lot of work in this year, hold a lot of promise for fixing some of these problems, but they can't be used as a straight substitution for textbooks. Incorporating open educational resources into teaching practices involves a rethink of those practices and perhaps a redesign of some elements of our curriculum. But the most important question I want to ask you is this: is content still king in 21st century education? There is so much more to education than just doing background reading, as I'm sure all of you know. Education itself is not held in a textbook. And if it is, then as educators, there is something wrong with the way that we are teaching. Education is not held between the covers of a textbook. It is something much more intangible. It's a process and one that involves some form of human interaction. And I think this is something that we are coming to learn and coming to grips with as we progress through Future Ready at La Trobe University and investigate how it is we're going to make education work for us in a blended online format, which is going to be quite different from the face-to-face way that we've come to be, well, that has come to be quite familiar in teaching methods quite recently. It's a very short presentation from me today. I really wanted to come here and raise more questions, and hopefully we can generate some discussion amongst ourselves about the environment that we find ourselves in now and what it is we can do about it that will best serve the needs, because the game has changed. Okay, the power is actually back in our hands now, but we have to be very careful about how it is we're dealing with corporate entities that are driven by profit margins and by very large corporations.